Yes, the question was posed, how was the State of Israel created? And some people assume that it was created by the United Nations. Other people think it was created because of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, but those answers do ignore the legal birth certificates of the State of Israel. And it was in 1897 that the first Congress of the World Zionist Organization formulated as its political ambition, the aim of Zionism is to create for the Jewish people a home in Palestine secured by public law. That was the purpose of the Zionist movement, and they were trying to find support for this ambition with the great powers of those days, Russia and Germany, and even the Vatican, and also the British government. And there they could find support for the political aim of Zionism. And it was during the First World War that the British government had, in contact with the World Zionist Organization, formulated the so-called Balfour Declaration, which is a letter written by the Foreign Secretary after Balfour to Lord Rothschild as representative of the Jewish community. And the letter said that His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights or political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country, unquote. And this Balfour Declaration, a unilateral declaration of the British government, can be seen as a starting point of this development towards the Jewish State of Israel. It was formulated, and at the same time, or some month later, approximately, the British Army, mainly composed of Australian and New Zealand soldiers, captured Jerusalem, and were received enthusiastically by the Jewish population. And on the 11th of December 1917, there was the official entry of General Allenby. And initially it was an occupied territory, but then the military authorities were replaced by a civil administration, anticipating the adoption of the mandate. And then we come to what happened after the First World War. The peace conference in Versailles and other places around Paris. One of the problems they had to solve was what to do with the territories and colonies of those vanquished countries, like, inter alia, the Ottoman Empire, which was already in decay. And the Versailles Treaty in 1919 created an international organization, the predecessor of the United Nations, the League of Nations. And within the covenant of the League of Nations, there was a provision to deal with these territories and colonies. And the approach was a new approach, inspired by the American President Woodrow Wilson. No longer the old traditional colonialism was to be continued, but there was created a system to help people and territories in a process of gradual development towards independence. And that is in Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations. And that is the basis of the so-called mandate system, which was also relevant for the Ottoman Empire. In the fourth paragraph of Article 22, there is reference to the certain communities formerly belonging to the Turkish Empire. They have reached a state of development where their existence as independent nations can be provisionally recognized, subject to the rendering of administrative advice and assistance by a mandatory until such time as they were able to stand alone. So there was the mandate system, and the Allied powers of those days, the victors of the First World War, Great Britain, France, Italy, and Japan, and there was also an associated power, the United Nations, the United States of America, and they convened in San Remo in 1920 as an extension of the Versailles Peace Conference to decide on the future of the Ottoman Empire. And they decided to create mandates for Mesopotamia, nowadays Iraq, Syria and the Lebanon, and also Palestine. And they decided that Britain should be the mandatory power of Palestine. And important is that in this resolution of San Remo, it was decided that the mandate should implement the Balfour Declaration. In other words, the creation of a Jewish national home in Palestine. And that's what happened in 1922. The mandate for Palestine was formulated, and Great Britain was appointed as the mandatory power. So it was not a colony, but it was a mandate. And the mandate for Palestine, if you compare it to other mandates, had a unique character for two reasons. First of all, having regard to the beneficiaries of this mandate for Palestine. The beneficiaries of the mandate are the Jewish people as such, not only the Jews living in the territory of Palestine, as was the case in the other mandates, people of Mesopotamia or Syria and the Lebanon or Rwanda, Burundi, they were the people living there and they were beneficiaries of the mandate. But in the case of the Palestine mandate, it was provided that the beneficiaries were the Jewish people as such, wherever they lived in the world. And that is clear from various articles of the mandate. The central provision is Article 2, which says that the mandatory shall be responsible for placing the country under such political, administrative and economic conditions that will secure the establishment of the Jewish national home and the development of self-governing institutions. And Article 6 of the mandate provided for the right of Jews to settle in the country and to facilitate Jewish immigration. Article 7 provided for the provision of Palestine, the acquisition of Palestine citizenship by Jews who take up their permanent residence in Palestine. And Article 4 of the mandate provides for the institution of a Jewish agency, and that was entrusted to the Jewish World Zionist Organization. So in many articles of the mandate make clear that there is a special character. This mandate has a very special character, and seeing the Jewish people as the beneficiaries. It refers the mandate to a Jewish national home, and not the formulation is not a Jewish state. But nevertheless, if we look into the history of the mandate and of the Balfour Declaration, it was clear that the intention was that eventually a Jewish independent state should emerge. The non-Jews living in Palestine were not overlooked in the mandate. There is a reference to the civil and religious rights in Article 2 of all the inhabitants of Palestine that notes civil and religious rights. Political rights were for the Jewish community to create an independent, to create a Jewish national home. And the ambitions and aspirations of the Arabs were addressed in other ways. As we see on the map, the original territory of the mandate extended to the eastern part of, or the eastern border of nowadays Jordan. But there was a provision in the mandate that made it possible for Britain to restrict its responsibilities for the creation of a Jewish national home to the part west of the Jordan River, so between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. The eastern part was then created into or made into an emirate, an Arab emirate, under the Hashemite dynasty, and which eventually became the Kingdom of Transjordan. So there the aspirations of Arabs were met, and otherwise also the mandate for Syria and the Lebanon and the mandate for Mesopotamia addressed the self-determination of the Arab peoples. The mandate was also unique in another respect when we look at the powers of the mandatory. They had full powers of legislation and administration. That was different from the other mandates, and that was necessary to make it possible to create a national Jewish national home for the Jewish people. Otherwise, due to the opposition of the Arab population, that would never have been possible. What was the reason for this unique, what was the justification of this special character, the unique character? Well, two reasons are given in the preamble. First, the historical connection of the Jewish people with the territory. Yitzhak Sokolov has also already explained that. And secondly, the reasons for reconstituting their national home in that country. And that was explained by Lord Balfour when he had to defend the mandate against the opposition in the House of Lords. And he referred then to the persecution of Jews and threat of annihilation throughout Western history, the history in Christendom. And then he said, if we can do something about it, we should do it. So there were reasons for this unique character, the kind of sacred trust to the Jewish people as such. Well, then how was the mandate implemented? Well, if you look at, there's a rather sad story. Almost from the beginning, there was a kind of, the British government tried to retreat from its obligations under the mandate. We see something already in the first white paper of Churchill, 1922, where a criterion was introduced for the immigration, economic capacity of the country, which is not in the mandate. Well, then the next white paper in 1930 of Parsfield, Lord Parsfield, it was suggesting that the obligations towards the Jews and the Arabs in the territory were identical, and they were not under the mandate, as we know. So, there was, of course, opposition against this view, and the Prime Minister MacDonald tried to appease the opponents, and by saying, well, we stick to the Balfour Declaration and the mandate, but nevertheless, gradually, step by step, and also because of the Arab opposition and revolt against the mandatory authorities, they tried to restrict the immigration of Jews to the territory more and more. Yitzhak Sokolov also referred to the Peel report about the partition of the mandate territory in a very small Jewish state and a larger Arab state, but that was rejected. And then in 1939, note the date, note the year during the Nazis had come to power in 1933, and they started already then the persecution and the suppression and eventually the extermination of the Jews. And in 1939, the British government adopted a new white paper, which was a kind of final death blow to the mandate and to the unique character of the mandate. And they said, there will not be a Jewish state. They said the immigration has to be restricted very much to a number in the first 5 years, and after that be subjected to the approval of the Arab population. And so that did away of the main obligations under the mandate, and therefore it was strongly criticized by Churchill, for example, he said that is a breach of the promise made to the Jewish people, and also by the permanent mandates commission of the League of Nations. It was highly criticized, and mind you, it was in the time 1939 when there was so much a need for a safe haven for the Jewish people because they were persecuted in Europe, in Germany, and all the countries that became occupied or annexed by the Nazis.
Matthijs, for 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes, thank you. I will try to succeed. Yes, that is, yes. Well, we know what happened during the war, and the restrictions remained there also after 1939, and up until 1943. Then there was, the British government became a little bit more lenient and made it possible for people to escape via Turkey to Palestine. But then for the great majority, it was too late, for many Jews had been murdered already. And even after the war, after the Second World War, the restrictions on the immigration to Palestine remained in force. It was very, very difficult. We know all the stories written about it. It was terrible. And then the British decided to terminate their the mandate, their responsibilities under the mandate, and they could not find a solution. So they submitted the whole issue to the United Nations, and that adopted the General Assembly in 1947, the so-called partition plan, which provided for the partition of the territory, as you can see here on the map, in a small Jewish state and an Arab state, while Jerusalem should be internationalized and its surrounding area, and the whole territory should be form an economic union. The plan was forthwith rejected by the Arabs, and it was accepted by the Jews under the provision that the Arabs would also accept it. But it was forthwith rejected by the Arabs, not only the Arabs living in the territory, but also the Arab states. And there was already a lot of violence and struggle between Jews and Arabs in that period. And the British were preparing their departure by the 15th of May. And on the eve of that, on the 14th of May, 1948, the Ben-Gurion proclaimed the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel. And that's the starting point of the modern State of Israel. It was a state, it had a territory, there was a population, and there was an effective government, even if it was at war, the war of independence. Finally, one remark about the legal relevance of what I have said. It's my view that the mandate is still relevant. And that is because of Article 80 of the UN Charter. That is a provision that provides for the transition from the mandate system under the League of Nations towards the new trusteeship system under the United Nations. So the mandate system was under the League of Nations and the trusteeship under the United Nations. And it said in Article 80 that except the agreement upon individual trusteeship agreements, nothing in this chapter of the Charter of the United Nations shall be construed in or of itself to alter in any manner the rights whatsoever of any states or any peoples, note that word, or the terms of existing international instruments to which the members of the United Nations may respectively be parties. So the rights of the peoples under the mandate should be respected. This clause has been called the Palestine Clause. It was to protect the rights of the Jewish people under the mandate. And so for that reason, even if there is no League of Nations anymore, the rights under the mandate are relevant. And I think they are relevant in legal terms because not the whole territory of the mandate is still the undisputed territory of the State of Israel. We have the disputes about the Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, Gaza. And in that debate, I think Article 80 is relevant to underline the relevance, the legal relevance of the mandate for Palestine, the birth certificate of the State of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthijs. That's been very interesting.